as is par for the course. For you, it's just been a few seconds. For me, it's been a couple of days on this. So it's time to put this truss rod back in here. I want to try to explain the mechanics of this, because I don't think some people understand this. If this stays straight in here and the neck pulls an underbow into this, think of it like a bowstring. Now the truss rod's sitting in here. If you tighten it up, what's it going to do? It's just going to pull more underbow into it. It's exactly like a bowstring. So once that neck gets underbow in it and you tighten up a straight truss rod, all you're doing is just tightening that underbow. You're just tightening it. Where conversely, if this already has an underbow in it and now it's following this metal line and you pull it straight, what's that do? That straightens out this rod and it lifts the middle. And it works perfectly if you do it right. But it doesn't work if you leave it straight. It's just, I don't know why people do that. I really don't. It makes no sense at all. So we're gonna fix it right now. Here we go. Okay, so how do you bend this? Well, I know it was in this direction. The reason I know that is because I can see the scars here where I was pulling it out with the pliers. So I know it was in there like this. So what I'm going to do, not that it really matters, but I'm just going to put it back like it was. And I'm going to pre-bend this. Now you might think, well, you got to have it do it scientifically. Not really. You just put a nice bend in it like so. See how it's bent now? You can see the bend in it. Now that may be too much, to be perfectly honest, but we're going to start with that. We can always adjust it. Now what I'm going to do here on this end, see, if you put it in here like this, then it's crooked. So what I want to do is I want to bend this end back down flat. And this may not be the right pliers for that. I may need stouter pliers. So got the bigger pliers. So I'm going to bend this down right there. Now hopefully you can see how it comes back straight again. That's what you want, just a little bit. I may have it too much. Okay, that's probably about right. And kind of the same thing here, because otherwise this is going to be pointing up in the air. So now I have to kind of bend this straight back again also. The thing is, you try to make sure your bends are perpendicular to your tail there. Okay, so I think that did that. So now, basically, this is straight in line with this. This end is straight in line with that. So when you pull on this, that lifts the middle. So let's see if it'll fit back in here. That's going to be the next question. It may not fit in here now, and we may have to do some adjusting. Well, I think it's going to. It looks like it's going to, but it's a tight fit here. I'm going to have to do some adjusting here. Well, actually, it went down in there. I didn't think it was going to. So let's see. Will it go all the way down? Pretty much. It goes down below this. As long as it goes below this surface, you're pretty much good. This nut is in here, and I think it's good. Yeah, I think we're pretty good there, really. All right. So now, if I can get it back out of there. Yeah, and we still got our bend. Now, it's not much of a bend, but we can fill under here now. We can fill a little bit in here, and we can fill this area here. So I'll make those fill pieces and show them to you, and then we'll fit it all together. I found a piece of board that is just about the right size, I believe, to fit this slot tight. So I think, no point in going to any extremes here. If we've got what we need, we might as well use it. So what I do is I lay this on here like so, and you can see my bends in there, and then I just take and trace it out, and in this case I'm going to use the fine point mechanical pencil here, and I'm going to trace this, and I'm going to pull on this end's caught over the end of this board, and that way I can keep it still while I'm tracing it. And I'm going to trace it just like so. I'm going to trace the other side of it too. Well, actually, Well, I am going to trace it this way too. It's kind of weird. You might think you could just use the same thing, but because of the thickness, I think it works better if you go ahead and trace it on both sides. I think my lead is giving me trouble here. It's not coming down. So I've got my tracings there. So this will be on top, of course, and this will be the bottom. This is going to end up just being like two little tiny wedges, one on each end. The middle here that really won't have anything below it, and above it, it's going to be, you know, this top will get shaved off smooth with the top of this. So that's just the way I do it. It works out pretty well. So we'll give it a shot and see how it works. I'm going to go cut this all out, and I'll be back. Well, I think this is going to be a nice little demonstration for you. This is not, I wasn't planning this, but it just kind of worked out this way, so I thought I'd show it to you. But you can see how I have the truss rod inserted into that slot I cut, and it fits perfectly. And I don't know if the camera can pick up these little lines, but you can see here I've drawn a line across here where I can cut it off, and then this will be a tiny wedge under the front, and this will be a tiny wedge under the back. And then this piece here will just fit on top of the truss rod, and this will protrude out of this slot here and will be high. And then I'll take, after we get it all glued in place, then I'll just take and trim that down smooth with the surface. And then when you tighten this up, it has no option except to straighten this rod out, and it will lift this middle. And so that's how the truss rod actually works. And now that I got the little pieces cut out, here's kind of how they go in there. You can see they're very tiny. I have them all marked so I know which direction they go and everything, but they'll go in there kind of like that. So now the trick is getting them to fit in the mandolin. That's sometimes easier said than done too. This one's not too tough because it goes right back here to the very back of the slot, and you can line it up fairly easy. So we'll try putting that one in first. That would be easy if it was going to be easy, but it won't. I'm going to have to clean the slot out a little bit. I think there's still some stuff on the sides of the slot. So let me get all this cleaned up and then I'll show you the installation. Okay, this one's fairly straightforward. I've got the slot cleaned out. It will go down in there now. And I don't know, you know, I'm toying with using wood glue or using CA glue, but I think I'll just go ahead and use the tried and true wood glue. So let's get the glue on this thing, get her in the slot. I try not to make too big a mess with this stuff. You know, I don't want the rod itself glued in place. I only want these boards glued in. So I'm going to put it on pretty thin. There'll be some get on the board, I'm sure, but not, I mean on the rod, but it's not enough to worry about too much. Let's see, we'll slide it down in there and I'll push it into place. We'll butt it up tight where it's butted up to the end of this slot here, and that should make it work just fine. I'll push it down all the way, and then I'll clean up any little glue spill out. Got some water here, I got a paintbrush, and I'll just go in here and clean up this edge, because again, I don't really want the glue down in the slot too much. It's not that's going to make that much difference, and we don't have to put the rod in immediately. We can give it a few minutes to dry, so it's not going to stick the rod. But I do want the rod to move freely so that when you pull on it, it'll do its job. Now, some people have used a straw around the rod, and I have done that myself, but I have found that that's really kind of unnecessary. If you do a good job this way, I actually think this is better, not using a plastic straw down in there, because you can keep the slot smaller, which to me, making the neck slot as small as you can is a strength thing. You know, you don't want to take out any more wood out of here than you have to. Of course, I'm putting it back in anyway. I'm filling it back in. So it's kind of 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. Okay, so that one's in and locked in there. Now this other one's not as easy because I don't know how far up I can, get everything in there. First of all, I'm just going to see that it'll actually go together the way I have it right now without the front wedge. And I believe it will, but we just got to test it out here. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, and it's going down in there, and it is going flush, so we're good there. This wedge is doing its job properly. This wedge down here is going to probably be a little more difficult, but I'm going to try to get it in there. We'll just have to see how it goes. It goes like this. No, actually, it goes like this. It's a little complicated because you can turn them a bunch of different ways. Cutting off a little lip there. It goes exactly like this. And I'm trying to decide how far up here I've got to get it. In fact, what I may do is cut off a little bit of this because I have a feeling it's not going to go up there. It's going to lift this up too much. So I do think I'm going to cut off a little bit of this. Take this back out of here, and I'm going to try to figure out some way to decide where that needs to go. Okay, this needs to go in here like this, so I want to mark this side here, that this is the side that's facing me, and I'm just putting a little scribble on there just so I know that's the side facing me. And I'm going to try this dry first before I glue it in because, you can't change it once you've made your commitment here. I'm just going to arbitrarily pick that spot right there because I don't know. And I'm going to put a little mark here so I know this is where the end of that little piece is. And I may have to make some adjustments. So let's put this back in here, see if it'll go in. And see if we can get it all down in there this way. I have a feeling it probably won't. Yeah, I don't think it's going to go. When I'm doing these without all this on here, it's not nearly as hard. But this piece here is the hard one all the time. It always is. I think I'm just going to cut my losses and make it a little bit smaller. Just shorten it up a little bit more even. And I think that'll do it. And I don't know, I'm just going to do it the easy way. Just going to cut it off here. There we go. It's down in there this time better, I think. So let's see how this works. Oh, that's perfect. That's like perfect. That's really good. I'll just mark the end of it right here. If it goes right there, we're good. That should work. So now if I can get it back out of here, and that may be the problem, now I can put my glue on this. In this case, just to make it simple on me, because it's going back under there, I'm only going to put it on the bottom, and that should be more than sufficient. I think we're really good. I don't think we got any real glue down in the slot at all. And I've got it pressed down in there, and I feel confident that this will go in there again. I don't think I have to worry about it too much now. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now we've got that in place. And now the trick of this is I have to get this in here, and we've got this sloping down, so I know this is going to have to be sloped down already. I know that. So I'm going to have to cut a little slope in this. I'm just going to go over to the sander and just guess it. I really don't know what it's going to be. I'm basically just going to parallel the peg head here, kind of get myself an idea of how much it needs. So it needs about starting right about here, and it's going to need a pretty good drop. It's almost going to need point to point here, so it's going Gonna need a pretty good drop. So I'm just gonna go sand that off, and then I think we're ready to go. Okay, you can hear the sander powering down. I just sanded this end off. I think it's gonna be pretty darn close to fitting, so let's see if it'll go. Oh, just about perfect. Might have sanded a little bit more away than I needed to, but that's fine. And you can see here how this is above this, like I predicted. So this is going to have to be cut off, but that's no problem. Now all we do is we just glue the sides of this piece in place, and to keep it down in the slot. So we just got to get glue on the sides of this piece. That rod doesn't move at all. In other words, there's no wiggle to it. You can tell it conforms perfectly to the bar because I'm not being able to press it up or down any place. It's right perfect. So all I'm going to do now is just clamp it, you know, reasonably tight. It doesn't have to be crazy tight or anything. Just enough to let it hold itself there for, well, I'll go ahead and probably give it till tomorrow, because not that it really needs it, but I've got a lot of other things to do anyway, so I'll just give it some time. Clamps have rubber pads on them, so that works perfect for this kind of thing. And I don't need to put a lot of pressure on it. So that should do it. We'll show you the next step when we get to it. Well, my friends, my plans have changed. Not like that ever happens, you know. My plans are locked in, right? Yeah, wrong. They change quite often, and I wasn't planning on looking at this again until tomorrow, but it's about 2.5 hours later, and so I'm sure the glue is completely set up, and so I'm sure we can take these clamps off, no problem. And I'm going to go ahead and work on this and maybe start working out how to figure out the wedge height and all that. But first I've got to trim this down to flush with the fingerboard. I'm going to use my little 8mm finger plane that one of my wonderful viewers sent me. I like the little tiny plane the best. I've got the 10mm that I used for nearly, well, at least 35 years, and the same plane, and I still use it a lot, but this little tiny one is even better in my opinion, because it's easier to push and it cuts really well. As you can see, it's just rolling that wood right off of there. What I'm watching here is that I'm getting the blade on the end of that wood and not hitting the metal. It wants to be cut this other direction, which is pretty much always the case. Whenever you feel comfortable going one way, the wood almost always wants to be cut the opposite way. It trims much easier going this direction. It actually cuts like butter going this way. I could feel that from the very first cut, but I wanted to go that way because I could start right there on that metal and I didn't have to worry about hitting it. This way I could actually hit the metal. It's not quite level, but I'm going to find another method for leveling that out, and I think I may go to a file here. This is a double cut file. Now you notice also that I have put a full piece of wood in here to fill this. If you remember before, it only had little tiny blocks of wood in here. Well, this is definitely stronger. So this by itself is going to strengthen the neck a little bit. I mean, I don't expect miracles from that, but it's every little bit of strength is a little bit more strength, you know. It's just that simple. And the fact that we have the whole slot filled with metal and wood, there's no air gap in there anymore, that also adds strength because it's one solid mass. And of course the obvious is that we've got a better truss right in there that can actually pull up now rather than just holding it like a bowstring. All right, I think I've got it. I'm just going to go this way. I'll draw file it one time, and I think it's going to be level enough. And if I had one more hand to hold it for me, it would be easy. That's why that carpet works pretty good. It kind of helps hold things. That feels real good. I don't really feel it now. Maybe a little bit right there. That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. Might use a little bit of sandpaper on it yet, but that's pretty good. I'll show you what my next step is here in just a minute. I'd go ahead and work it over a little bit with some sandpaper. This is 220. Partly because there's still the least little bit of a underbow, and I mean just a very slight underbow to this neck. I've already taken most of that out, but this tail is still a little bit high, so I'm going to use the sandpaper to bring the tail down. And up to now, I've just done rough carving on this and a little bit of smoothing with this, of course. And so this hopefully will get rid of any other bumps that are in there, and we'll have one continuously flat surface. And if this tail would fall down a little bit, I'd be okay with that. I don't want this tail up at all. Level or down is okay, up is not good. Okay. Let's see now if we've gotten rid of the underbow. It's pretty negligible. I mean, there's something there. I'm not exactly sure what I'd call it at this point. Like maybe little lumpy things, like there's a little bit of a tiny lump right here. Probably no thicker than 3 or 4 thousandths. So I'm going to try to get rid of that. Just going to look at it again. Wow, that looks pretty darn good. That looks pretty good now. And now this tail is probably 3 or 4 thousandths lower than the flat plane of this. This section here now is a flat plane, and this is dropping down 3 or 4 thousandths, where this used to probably raise up by about 30 thousandths. It was quite high. Looking really good. Compared to where we were, this is night and day better. But there's still teeny tiny amounts of stuff. I'm also focusing a lot of my filing up here at the nut, because the nut also seemed to be just a little bit high right here. This between the nut and the first fret, the neck seems to come back up just a little bit. So I'm trying to get anything that causes an underbow out of this thing. I would like to see it just perfect with no light at all. And that's getting pretty dang close. I can barely see anything. And when I say barely see anything, I'm talking like almost nothing. So that's good. And I'm gonna rake this tail off just a little bit more, because like I said, flat or down is okay. Up is not good at all. It really does depend on where I have the ruler at before whether I think it's perfect or not. It's pretty darn good, but I still think this on the treble side, this is still just a teeny bit high in places. 2 places, right here and right here. I think I can go with that. I like that. That is yeah, it's 1,000% better than when we started. It's not even measurable difference. It's just like day and night difference. Okay, so that gets me to that point. Now we've got this, underbowed fingerboard to put back on here, and I don't really like the idea that it's underbowed, but on the other hand, I don't think that's much consequence, because the neck itself is straight now. And it looks like it's going to go back on here really well, so I think we're good there. But I don't think it's going to give me the bridge height we want. In fact, I know it's not. So let me set up for that and try to do a little experiment here. Well, to my surprise, it's looking better than I thought it was going to look. I'll get this neck on here and press it flat with this straight edge. And here's the original bridge. you know, it's not looking terrible. It's low though, because this bridge is all the way down. It's not as good as I thought it was. I thought it was better than that for a second. I'm going to try to measure it here. It's 6 7/8 to the 12th fret. So let's try to measure that and see if we're not even there yet. It needs to be more like here. So right about there, and now the straight edge is actually setting on the bridge. Yeah, so we definitely are going to need a wedge. I'll show you how I calculate that here in just a minute. Well, my friends, I'm working on this mandolin again today. This is the jig I typically use to set the neck into the body of my mandolin. And typically when I get the neck set right, the top would lay right in here. You know, and I thought this one would actually, need a wedge to make it work. But honestly, it works just about like mine do. It looks really close. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that. I don't really see a gap. It's just about right, exactly. Which really kind of floors me, because I know the bridge on this is kind of low, and I'm trying to figure out why that is. And I'm a little confused, I'll be honest. The only thing I can figure out is this is only touching right in the dead center. Both sides are off of this. You know, in other words, the curve is much steeper on this. I don't know if that is affecting what my outcome here or not. I'm a little confused. The actual angle between here and the high point is just about the same as what I use on my mandolins according to this jig. So I'm a little confused, I really am. I have to think this through and figure out what's going on here. While I had it here, I just happened to notice that this mandolin, I didn't realize, but it's been refinished. You can see runs in it, and there's runs in the finish on the back too. I haven't really paid any attention to anything other than what I was working on, which is straightening out this neck. Well, anyway, I'm going to have to put on the thinking cap here and try to figure out what's going on. Well, I have to be honest with you completely, and that is that I'm all kinds of confused. You know, I took a lot off of this tail here to get rid of the duck tail. In other words, below the fretboard here, I've planed this down so that it would get rid of the ski ramp, the underbow, the ducktail, whatever you want to call it. Well, because I took that down, I would have expected the neck angle to drop down even more and that we would need a taller wedge. Well, right now, when I check it, I'm coming out above the bridge. So in other words, we'd have to raise this bridge up. I'm totally confused at that. I really am. I did not expect that at all, because it was already set up where on the lowest setting, the strings were too high. Wow, that really makes me wonder what's going on here. I am really blown away in confusion. Usually this doesn't happen, at least not to this degree. I'll do some more thinking and I'll get back to you. Well, I went and got a new bridge here, and I gotta be honest, this one's, it's rocking just a little bit. I wish it was setting a little flatter. I'm putting it about where the bridge should go. It is sitting on top there. Now I've got it all the way down, and with it all the way down, I'm seeing a little bit of a gap under the fingerboard, which is what I should have expected. And I really kind of was floored here of why I wasn't seeing that before. And I'm still a little floored of why I wasn't seeing it before, but something must have been out of kilter, because it's definitely there now. And I'm getting a pretty good wedge in here now to give me an idea. I'm trying to do as far back on the fingerboard as I can, and this wedge is the perfect thing for deciding how thick the wedge would need to be. It looks like it's going to need to be right at 80 thousandths, 90 thousandths. I'm going to go with 90 thousandths, and then we'd have to raise the bridge up a little bit. So 80 thousandths, 90 thousandths, something like that, down to nothing is looking like where we will be here when we make this wedge. So let's see how that goes. Well, my friends, I have spent some time making the rough material for this wedge. And when I say rough material, that's what it is. It's just a 80 thousandths of an inch thick piece of wood, because the deepest part of this is going to be 80 thousandths. And it's going to go down to nothing up here, basically. Now, the problem is, how do I get a taper in that piece of wood? Well, I got a couple ideas. You know, actually there's several options, and they're not bad options for me. They might not be real practical for you, depending on the tools and your skill level. But like, for instance, you know, if I glued this on here just like it is, I think I would be able to just physically carve it down to nothing. In other words, carve it to almost nothing here and then make a long, slow taper here. And I believe I could actually hand carve that with my finger planes and chisels and straight edges and things and scrapers. And I think I could do a real good job on that. But that would take a little bit of time. I think there's a quicker method, and I'll show you what that method is, assuming it works out. If it doesn't, you'll probably never see this. Well, here's my idea. I have a flat piece of, this is actually particle board with a, you know, factory coating over it, and it's very flat. It is really flat. I think it's what I made my tabletop out of. I'm not sure. This is just an extra scrap piece, of course. And what I'm going to do is, since this material is 80 thousandths of an inch thick, I made an 80 thousandth of an inch strip of wood here. My plan is to CA glue that strip of wood down where it can't move. Also put a drop or two of CA glue on this where it can't move. A drop or two of CA glue on this end where it can't move. And then I'll put 2 rails along here that are the exact same thickness by going through my thickness sander. And then I'll just take my router and go on here and route this off, and that should give me a real long wedge. Now, I may have to support the middle a little bit, and what I'm thinking of doing is just sliding a little shim or something under there just to keep the middle from bouncing, and I can use a straight edge to check that it's flat. So that's about all I can do, I think, and I think that'll work. I've done this type of thing before. I don't honestly remember the last time I did it, but I know I've done this before. So we're going to give it a shot and see how well it works this time. Okay, I've already put CA glue on the back side of this little strip here. I'll spritz it with this just to get it to set up where I don't have to sit here and hold it. The trick about this is that you don't want to set this way up there on this strip, because that raises the angle. The further you go, the higher that gets. So you just want the edge on the 80 thousandths in order to be accurate. So again, I'm just going to put a little glue there, put it right on the edge, as close to the edge as I can, and get it to sit down also. And then I'll put just a drop or two right here, just to keep it from doing much. This may be a problem, I don't know. I may get too much glue on here and it may turn out to be difficult to get it loose, but I think stuff will pop off of this board fairly easy. Alright, so that kind of gets me locked in there on that. Now I'll put some rails here that the router can ride on and get it all set up to route it out. Well, my friends, it's time to put the wedge on this mandolin neck and raise it up. And I've cut this wedge. It's 80 thousandths thick on this end, and it's basically 0 on this end. And I showed how to cut a wedge like this in my recent shop talk. It was shop talk number 76, how to cut a long taper wedge. So if you'd like to see how I actually made that and made it that accurate, and it's very, very accurate. I don't know if you can see how it's literally down to 0 here, and it's 80 thousandths here, and it's a long continuous taper. If you'd like to see how I cut that, check out shop talk number 76. Okay, moving down here, this might be a little tricky to clamp because of the fact that it's so thin. I'm not even sure how I'm going to go about it yet, but I guess the first step is to get some glue on here, so let's do that. Now, I don't want a ton of glue on here. I just want to a thin, even coat, and we want to get it spread around nice and even. All right, that's a nice, thin, even coat. I'm not going to spread it on this piece, and the reason I'm not is because this is so thin that it'll start warping and everything. So I'm only just going to lay this right on here. For the most part, I'm just moving it to the very tip end right here and sticking it down. And quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to clamp this yet. I may just try to find me a good flat straight board that I can use as a caul thing to just clamp there. I think what I'm going to do is let it sit there and get a little tacky for a couple of minutes so it doesn't slide around so much, because that's another problem with this kind of thing, is that it likes to slide around. And I don't want it to move. I want it to stay where I need it there. Just found a piece of scrap wood. This is actually a piece off the bottom of an old door. It's even got the siding, the facing of the door on both sides. It doesn't matter. I just sanded it really flat and smooth on that side, and it's just something to clamp this down and, you know, hold it good and flat while it's curing. And so that's the next thing, is to get some clamps on here. This has rubber pads on it already, so it's a good choice for me. Putting this one under the heel of the neck so that it gets a lot of pressure on it. It seems like it's sticking and staying where I want it. It doesn't seem like it's sliding anymore since I was able to let it sit there and get tacky for a while. I think what I'm going to try here, this isn't a real good way to clamp this, but I'm not going to put a lot of pressure, and these little clamps like this don't put a lot of pressure anyway. It's just more to keep it together. So I'm just kind of using that to hold that tail end down there, and I think we're good to go, really. I'll put another small clamp here in the middle just to be safe. These put a little bit more pressure than this one, but not a lot. That ought to be fine. I'll let that set up for, I don't know, several hours anyway. This wedge has been sitting over the whole weekend, and it is dried, and I just started removing the extra that was on the sides here. I just took an X-Acto knife and cut that off. And then I remembered, well, I need to turn the camera on. But now I'm just taking my little finger plane, and I'm going to plane down the rest of it to the sides. It wants to be cut this way. No matter which way you go, it'll always be the opposite way that it wants to be cut. It cuts real easy that way. Well, wouldn't you know, right there I see a place where it's not glued down. Now, how that happened, I have no idea, considering I had it clamped, and I don't know. There's just so much to this. There's always something. So we'll have to put a little CA glue in there and make sure that that's stuck. I don't see it on this side too much, I don't think. Maybe a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. But this side here, I can definitely see it. Always something. I would never have thought that would have been the case. I thought I had that clamped and glued really well. Always something. Always, always, always. Well, now I have to cut this shape to the back here. That's going to be a little tricky because I can't really see it very well, and I just have to I think I'm just going to take a Dremel tool and just kind of start working my way into the end of this, because it's kind of got a weird shape. In fact, I think I'll try to draw the shape by eye. So that's about what the shape would be right there. And I'll probably just take my Dremel tool and a cutter and start whittling that down. I've got me a little cutter here, and I'm just going to start whittling away and eating it a little bit at a time. Well, that didn't take very long, and it looks pretty close to the shape that's there. I can always refine it a little bit more with a file. that's pretty darn good. As I mentioned, I'm going to put a little bit of CA glue right there in the one spot where it doesn't like, where I'm sure it's not completely attached. I don't know why. It's just one little spot there, right down that crack, just in case there's any problem. And I'll push it in, hold it in like that, really tight. Okay, that should take care of that. Well, now that I've got it pretty much to shape, I'm going to just flatten off the top a little bit, just to clean it up. The router leaves a few marks in it and things, and I just want to get it good and smooth. And I'm going to get down with the straight edge and make sure that it's straight. Perfect. I don't even see any light under there at all. I think I'll get my close-up glasses and look at that again. Oh, I mean, there's a trace, but it's like you can't really tell there's any light there at all. That's really good. That's as flat as it can be. Now I'm going to double check my angle this way too, because that was the other thing the customer really wanted, and I think I've already got that carved in there, but in case this changed it at all, I just want to double check it. Okay, so I've got those little guides on there again. I'm going to look across to make sure they look like they're running parallel to one another. They do. They look like they're good. So we could start here and take it down. Boy, they both touch at the same time. I mean, like, that's just about perfect, really. I mean, like, they both touch at the same time. I don't see how that could be any better. Well, that's as good as I can do it, so go with that and we'll move on. Before I can glue the fingerboard back on the mandolin, I want to clean it up and make sure I get all the little bits of wood and glue and things like that off of it so that it'll lay flat and it won't have any curl or odd shapes going on. So I've just got one of my little planer blades here. This is the tooth blade, which I thought would be killing two birds with one stone. I'll tooth up the surface a little bit, which, you know, in case you think we're making deep grooves, we're not. It's just barely making any grooves at all, but it's just enough to give it a little bite. I especially want to make sure there's no glue on the very ends back here, because this is what would hold it up and make it look like a ski ramp again. So if anything, I want this even a little extra low or clean. I don't want this sticking up. So this is the important area right here. Well, it's all important, but this is where you can really have a big problem in a hurry. Now the fingerboard itself already has an underbow in it, but I think we can take that out just by clamping it back on here. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And what I'm going to do, again, as more of a sanity check than anything, is I'm going to temporarily clamp this down and take a look at it and make sure it looks good and flat. Okay, I have it temporarily clamped on there, and by eye it looks really flat. I'm just going to check it here and see if I see any anomaly, and it looks real good. I think it's just about as good as it could be done. Now the trick is, what about the bridge height? So let's look at that next. Well, based on what I can tell, and again, a lot of it is just a guess and a feel. It really looks like it's just about the perfect height based on where the bridge used to be, and it looks like it's just touching the bridge, and that's with the bridge all the way down. You understand, the saddle's all the way down. So I think we're about as good as we can be. Yeah, you never know until once you glue them up, you're committed. Right now we've got room to change things around, but the truth is, you just never know till you know, and that you can think you're 100% right, and something will throw you a curve at the last second. Right now, based on everything I can tell, it looks like it's just as close to perfect as it can be. So I guess we have to glue it on there, and then we'll see what happens after that. Everything looks real good, so we're going to go ahead and get this glued on. Now the thing about that is, whenever you put glue on a flat surface and try to clamp it down, it will slide and it will move, and there's just nothing you can do about that. You think you can hold it and you think you can keep it still, And of course, a lot of people these days use salt and all kinds of other gimmicks to hold it still. But I don't do any of that. I use the old school method, and the old school method is to use 2 little pins and locate it that way. So what I do is I drive a little tiny wire nail. This is a very tiny wire nail. I support the neck with my hand so we're not creating any shock. Like that. Just drive it in just the least little ways. Try to get it straight up and down. You don't need to drive it very deep. You take your wire cutters like this, you lay them flat on here, and you cut it off. That leaves a little tip of a nail sticking up there. Just a little sharp spike. Very, very small. And we do the same thing. I always do it on alternate sides, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to be in a solid spot. Right about here looks like a solid spot. And I'm going to tap this one in. Again, supporting it by hand so that it doesn't create any shock. Cut it off. Just that simple. Nothing to it. It's actually a very quick technique. Then what I want to do is locate this up here at the front like this. Try to get it lined up as best I can. Once I get it located just right, side to side, all that, like that's it right there, I think. Then I just take a hammer. This is a plastic jawed hammer, and I tap it right there. And that will put a nice divot right where you need to put a little drill. And then back here, we're going to do the same thing. We got that, get that one back in its spot, and we'll lock up this one here and make sure it's good and tight. And then we'll tap it also. And that made a little divot there. So now all I do is just take a tiny drill, just make an indentation in here. I'm not drilling through. I'm just taking a drill and just making a tiny little indentation to lock these things into their spots. So now I just take the drill and make the little mark here. And this bit is a little bit dull anyway, so that's kind of good. So you can't really drill too fast with it. And that should take care of that. That one locks right in. I can feel it. This one locks in, I can feel it, and now you can't move it. And that's the way you do that. And then you don't have to worry about it sliding around when you clamp it. So let's get her going. Just putting on a thin amount of glue. It probably looks like there's more there than there is. This is going to be hard to spread all of this out. I'm not even sure I can get that much. I mean, I have a feeling I'll need more. It looks like a lot, but it's not much. And I like to get full coverage, but not an excessive amount of glue. It actually turned out pretty close. I have a feeling it's not quite full coverage, unfortunately. I think I'm going to run just a little bit more down through there. That looks real good. And we're going to do that on here too. We could probably get by with just one side, but I think it's better to do this to get it all covered. Again, the reason you need those nails, because when you get these two slick surfaces together, you cannot keep them still. You can clamp all you want and they will slide. Ask me how I know. I've come back the next day and only to find out that what I thought was perfect and clamped up perfect had slid overnight, or slid probably within just a few minutes of me leaving, and made a mess. So I had to take it back off and do it again. So I've learned it's better to just take the extra step with the nails, and then you don't have to deal with that. Okay, we're good. What I'm going to do is just take these clamps as temporary and hold it, and then I'll get the big C clamps. And, well, wouldn't you know, that one's not working on camera, of course. Why would it? Back here, I'll just use this clamp. I think it'll be fine. Put this under the actual heel of the neck and get this one snugged down really tight. You can see the glue starting to squeeze out, but yet no sliding, which is what you want. Now I'll just take this off and clamp this up here with this. These have rubber pads on them, so they're good. I have a pad on the bottom of these, but I still put additional padding on them. No matter how tight you think you've got these clamped and how perfect you have it clamped, there will always be air pockets. So you want to put as many clamps on it as you can get. Again, ask me how I know. That should be good. That squeezed out quite a bit of glue, I can see that. So I think we're as good as we can do for now. I don't know if it's clamps or if it's my alignment, but it looks like it's aligned a little bit off to that side. I gotta be honest, it's pretty close back here though. Maybe it's just my little wedge. That's probably all it is. It's probably just my wedge needs to be trimmed. I'm gonna go with that. Yeah, even though when you try not to get too much glue, if you get a good clamp job done, there'll be a lot of glue squeeze out. And that's what you want. Even though people say you can squeeze all the glue out of the joint, I've never had that issue in 40 years. And I'll just stick with that. Clamp them as tight as you can reasonably clamp them without deforming the wood. That's what I always say. There you go. I'm going to let that set overnight.